Hello and welcome to the Sami Parvez show. Today I'm joined by Katy. She is an independent candidate for Montreal by-election. We will be discussing about our goals on this campaign and also why she is interested to run in this Montreal by-election. Thank you so much, Katy, to joining me on the Sami Parvez show. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
It's my pleasure. So could you please tell me, so what inspired you to run in this Montreal by-election? And could you also please tell me about yourself?
Sure. My full name is Katy LaRouchetel, and I'm the candidate of the Communist League in the LaSalle of Verdun by-election. And I'm running because it's part of helping to put forward a working class perspective on really the disaster that's unfolding in the world as war, economic crisis bears down on us. You know, the entire capitalist system is kind of degenerating around us. And workers are looking for a way. We're in a mood to fight, you know, and we're looking for a way forward. So right now, the big thing that's happening that shows what we can do is this rail strike by 9,300 members of the Teamsters Union that's being prepared right now. It's Thursday, August 22nd, so in a few days' time. These workers may well be on strike against the two big rail companies in Canada, Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City, so CN and CPKC. So this is really big. And our campaign is all about building solidarity with workers who were fighting like this, using their union power to defend basic things like, would you like me to explain what the strike is about?
Yeah, if you would like to.
Oh, I mean, this is a fight that I encourage every single working person in this country to be part of through your union, your church organization, your neighbors. Tell people the truth. Get down to the picket lines when they're up on Thursday. So what's happening is that these rail workers are being asked and demanded by their employers to work unsafely with big fatigue bearing down on them every day. These workers, it used to be a crew of 5 would train. You'd have 2 on the back end of the train, 2 or 3 on the front, and you'd be able to really know what was happening all around you. And the trains were much shorter than they are now with 5 people on them. Now you have a crew of 2 or 3, and those trains can be well over 100 cars. They can be 2 or 3 kilometers long. They have dangerous goods, chloride, oil, all kinds of chemicals on them. They go through towns and cities. Nobody knows what's in those in those rail cars as they go through your town. And these workers are responsible for not only their own safety, but also the safety of all the communities around them. And now the companies are trying to shorten their rest time so that CP wants to make a minimum rest time so that workers only have 12 hours between their shifts. I mean, that means some of them will only get 4 or 5 hours sleep, and then they go back. So they're fighting against that. And the other thing is that CN wants to be able to tell, for example, workers in Montreal, oh, we have a shortage in Saskatchewan. Off you go to Saskatchewan for 3 months. Never mind your family, never mind your kids, never mind whatever you're supposed to be doing at home. Off you go. So workers are just standing up for their basic safety. And also, the raises that they're being offered are ridiculous. It's like 1% and 2%, and everybody knows that that's below inflation. So they're basically being offered wage cuts. So, but you see, the big thing is the employers now are going completely wild, saying it's going to be a catastrophe if both, because this is both rail lines in Canada. So it means that one company, if they were on strike, they could maybe push some of the goods to the other company, but both of them on strike means nothing moves. And 70% of all merchandise between cities in Canada is moved by rail. It's $1 billion a day, actually more than $1 billion a day of merchandise that is transported by rail in Canada. So, the employers are saying it's a catastrophe. The government has to intervene. They have to do binding arbitration, make them go back to work, something. And so there's going to be a lot of propaganda saying the farmers need the fertilizer and so on and so on. But basically, we should be saying, all working people, no, the companies should be offering workers safe working conditions, and this whole thing would stop.
Mhm.
So, that's what our campaign is about, being part of fights like this, because as workers use our unions to fight for our rights, and increasingly workers are doing that. I mean, in Montreal, I was just at a rally a few days ago in downtown Montreal of hundreds of hotel workers. And these hotel workers, they come from all over the world. They work these physical jobs in a hotel, I mean, a lot of workers pointed to their wrists and their backs when I was talking to them, because they explained they hurt themselves on the job. You have to bend down all the time. There's a lot of repetitive motions, tucking sheets underneath the heavy mattresses, things like that. And they all explained that they gave a lot back to the companies during COVID, because during the pandemic, a lot of the hotels closed down. And then when they opened up, they hired more people back. They didn't bring as many back as had been there before. So people have been pushed to do more work with fewer staff. And their wages did not keep pace with inflation during that time. So now the workers explain that hotel room prices have gone up 67% over the past few years, but their wages went up 8% over the period of the last contract. So they're saying they need a 36% wage raise over the 4 years of their coming contract in order to just try and get back some of what they lost during the past years, and to try, some of them explained that it took them years and years and years to get a decent shift. It takes a while to get full time. So, and this is 3,500 workers in the hotel industry across Quebec that are in this fight right now. So, there's all kinds of working people who are fighting to use our unions to stand up for the basic working conditions and wages that we need. And our campaign is about saying this is the first step in building a party of labor, which is what we need to do in order to go beyond the fight with one employer. And we need to be able to say, workers need to run the country. And that's what we need to do. We need to have a party of labor that can organize beyond the unions, the non-union workers, working farmers, students, small shopkeepers, everybody who's suffering from this huge capitalist, economic, moral, financial crisis, and mobilize us to be able to fight for our rights, and through that, take power out of the hands of the rich.
Mhm. Okay.
That's what this campaign is about.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for a brief explanation. So, what should the government do about it, or what are you going to do for keeping such workers safe as an MP if you get elected?
What I explain is that it's the power of working people when we unite. That's what changes things. Even our right now, you and me, to be able to speak freely, to protest the government, to say workers have different interests from the bosses, all of that was won because people fought for the right of freedom of speech and to organize. So what I would use my position to do is to help build solidarity with the fights that are occurring, to get out the truth about the attacks on democratic rights that are happening right now. Because I tell you what the government is doing, which is extremely bad and dangerous for working people is it's actually the government right now run by the Liberals and the New Democratic Party, the NDP. They have introduced some laws that are extremely dangerous for democratic freedoms. The Emergency Measures Act. Oh, now it says my internet connection is unstable. Can you still hear me?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I can hear.
Good. This Emergency Measures Act that the federal government with NDP support introduced and then used against the truckers in Ottawa when they were protesting a couple of years ago in February of 2022. That Emergency Act should be repealed. It's one of the points in the Communist League program, because you know what that law did was it gave the government the right to send 3,000 police armed with, they had sharpshooters, they had tanks, they had military grade weapons against a couple of hundred truckers who were doing nothing more than protesting government policy in the middle of the Ottawa streets. And then Trudeau had the temerity to say, well, they weren't just protesting, they were trying to change government policy. Well, that's our right to change government policy. That's the whole point. So, you know, what the government is doing right now to undermine democratic rights is aimed at stopping us from being able to organize to do exactly what we need to do as we go into the coming years, which is to defend ourselves as working people and organize in our own name. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely use my position in Parliament to speak out against that.
Okay. Yeah, we saw like what happened during Freedom Convoy, and still there are many folks, the leaders are still facing charges and are in the court. You know, like it is tough time for them, which is extremely ridiculous as Canadian citizen, which is one of the freest world. You know, but it seems like we are still living in I can call it dictatorship. You know, like you cannot like protest freely, but yes, the army only being sent in communist or dictator regime like China, Russia, or Venezuela, or some other, Iran specifically. You know, like, or India, Pakistan, such countries, you can expect it, but not like in Canada, which was shocking for me and many fellow Canadians.
Well, and I'm glad that you mentioned the spokespeople for the Freedom Convoy who are on trial right now, because those trials, they all proceedings against Pat King, Chris Barber, Tamara Litch, and also those in Coutts who are on trial right now and who are going to be sentenced. All of those trials should be dropped, and all charges should be rescinded. Because what has been done to those people in Coutts? Several were kept in jail for 3 years, 3.5 years on very minor charges. It's completely unprecedented in Canada for charges like it's possessing a restricted firearm. I think that was one of them. And the guy was kept in jail for 3.5 years before trial. All of that is scandalous. But, you know, I would take issue with one of the things you said, because the fact is that we shouldn't accept it, but we should expect this kind of thing from the Canadian government, because this government, just like all capitalist governments around the world, defends the rights and the needs of the capitalist class. Our society really is divided. It's not all Canadians together for peace and prosperity. No, that's what the rail workers are facing. It's the rail companies that are willing to put our lives at risk for their profits. And the Canadian government is a government of the rich. So as the economic crisis deepens, as the governments that represent the rich, as they jockey for position around the world, and they are willing increasingly to use armed might to go to war against their competitors around the world, and they're going to drag us into those wars as cannon fodder in their efforts to secure their power. I mean, that's what Russia did when they invaded Ukraine. You know, it has everything to do with Russia wanting to get back the riches that Ukraine represents. It has nothing to do with any attack against Russia by Ukraine. Ukraine's no threat to Russia, but so, and in the Middle East right now, I mean, Ottawa, Washington, Paris, London, Tehran, none of them are looking out for the rights of the Jews or the Palestinians. They're all simply jockeying for their own positions. So the Canadian government is a government that represents the rich, and that's why we have to organize to defend ourselves. And, you know, one of the other things I think that shows them how we have to really fight for a working class perspective on everything is in the war between Israel and Hamas. Trudeau right now is campaigning for a ceasefire. He says, "Oh, it's terrible." He what's happening in Gaza. He takes up the figures that Hamas uses for the deaths of the Palestinians, but he never explains and doesn't speak out about the fact that after October 7th, that's what started this current conflict. This was organized by Iran, the Tehran government, which I don't know if you were part of them, but I certainly was part of the demonstrations defending Gina Amini and all of the other Iranians who were in the streets protesting the death of this young woman who supposedly wasn't wearing her hijab properly a few years ago. The Iranian people do not support their government. They fight for democracy. But so the Iranian government is behind Hamas. They are the ones that want to push their regional power beyond the borders of Iran. And they're using Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah in Lebanon to do that. So they orchestrated the massacre on the 7th of October, were marched into Israel, they raped, tortured, shot people in the back, if they were Jews or if they associated with Jews. That's who was aimed at. It was to kill and maim, kidnap and torture Jews. So Trudeau does not talk about that. And he doesn't talk about all the incidents since October 7th in Canada of Jews who have been attacked. Here in Montreal, the incidents of Jew hatred have skyrocketed, the same in Toronto and other cities across Canada. That's not true of the Muslim community. There are incidents of course, of hatred and attacks against Muslims, but Jew hatred has skyrocketed since the 7th of October. And this is like the world upside down. They were the ones that were attacked, the Jews, on the 7th of October, and now the attacks continue. I just went down not long ago to one of the schools here in Montreal. It's a Jewish school for young men, and there was a big bullet hole in the door. And so I gave them a letter of solidarity saying that all working people have to stand up against this kind of thing. So Trudeau does not talk of that because he doesn't care about the Jews and he doesn't care about the Palestinians. He is only looking out for the interests of Canadian big business, and they all want a piece of the pie, you know, in the Middle East and elsewhere. So you know, I think that working people, we need to have our own foreign policy as well. We have to see ourselves as citizens of the world. And the rail workers are a good example of why, because, you know, the rail bosses and the others, when they've been crying, oh, catastrophe about this strike coming up, they have said, well, now that potash, Canada is the biggest exporter of potash in the world, and most of it's absolutely key to be transported by rail in one week, if you had to place the rail transport of potash, which is produced in Saskatchewan, by trucks, it would be 10,000 trucks a week that they would need to replace the rail traffic for potash. Anyway, one of the big companies, I think it's called Canpotex, something like that, they said, well, this is a big problem for us that the rail workers are going on strike because we lost market share after the port workers in Vancouver went on strike and potash was not being exported with any regularity from Vancouver for a while, from the West Coast. So Russia won some of our customers, they said. Well, now we're trying to get those customers back. Belarus and others were trying to get into the market. But if the rail workers go on strike, then they're going to prevent us from doing that. So you see, we are players on an international level, and we have to have our own policy. We don't care about the Canadian bosses and their profits. We want to reach out with a hand of solidarity to working people around the world, because we need everywhere to take power into our own hands. You know, that's the way forward to stop war. That's the way forward to begin to build each society in every country based on human needs.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, usually like government does not, mostly like I know like it does not work for people, but it works for rich or elites, like what's happening in if there would be a peace, so how Washington and Ottawa would sell their arms, weapons, like to like conflicted zones. So like these weapons and arms like play a key economic role for countries like Canada and the United States. And yeah, and with respect to Palestine and Israel conflict, or Israel or Hamas conflict, it is all about Iran and other like, yeah, actually like Iran, which is supporting all those terrorist organizations, and from the Israel side, like these first world countries like Canada and US or UK or France and other their allies are keep they are just keep pushing their interest rather than Jewish or Palestinians interest, like they don't want this to come to an end. They just want to grow, but it all depends, like there are too many tycoons are sitting on the capital cities of these so-called democratic world. Yeah, and okay, so let's move to another topic. It's the cost of living. Like you already mentioned, like the inflation is too high, but we are seeing nothing, and we also have a carbon tax from Liberal government under Justin Trudeau, who pushed it, I believe, back in 2016 or 17. Since then, it keeps growing on every April 1st. So what's your take on this, and how as an MP you play your role to reduce the inflation?
What we say is that workers are the ones that take the brunt of high prices. It's obvious that to all of us that we pay more for the basics. Groceries, gas, rent, they've all gone sky high. So the way that we protect ourselves from that is to fight for wages that rise with inflation, because wages do not cause inflation. Wages always lag behind inflation. And when the bosses or others tell us, oh, well, if you get a wage raise, that'll just send the prices higher, so you shouldn't bother asking for a wage hike, that's just smoke being blown in our faces. So really the protection that we have is to use our union power, and to use union power not just for unionized workers, but for all workers, to bring up the standard of living by fighting for cost of living allowance. COLA, COLA. Some unions have those clauses in their collective agreements, and we need that for everybody. We need that for pensioners. We need that for all aspects of our income, is protection against inflation. And this carbon tax, I mean, none of these things are going to protect the environment or do anything except take more money out of our pockets. So I'm definitely not in favor of any of those.
And what are you hearing from the residents, like when you go for door knocking?
Yes, we do a lot of door to door, and one of the big concerns, apart from people saying, literally asking me, do you think the Third World War is a possibility? Because people are thinking about what's happening in the future, and they see everything getting worse. One of the big things, of course, is housing. I mean, I have coworkers who have kids and who are in small apartments and who daren't move, because if you move, your rent goes way, way up. So it's in a country which this is the second biggest country in the world by geographic space. So the idea that we don't have enough housing is absurd. But the reason that we don't, of course, is because the real estate industry is based on profit, and they're only going to build what they can make big bucks off, and it's all based on land speculation in addition to that. So one of the things that we're hearing a lot is that we need to have solutions to these social questions, and they cannot, you see, be solved with some kind of little promise by some politician. Really what we need is for the unions to take on these social questions and organize a movement to fight for the government to put us to work, to build the houses, the daycare centers, the hospitals, the roads that we need, because it's a big social program that we need to change the dynamic of what's being provided to us. And also, I mean, you probably are aware of that right now, of the unemployment that's really skyrocketing. I mean, youth unemployment in Quebec, it's 14%. And if you're an immigrant, it's 21%. And those are the official figures, and they're usually lower than reality, So there are a lot of people who would like to have work. So, but you see, it has to be not based on what employer thinks they can make money off you, and therefore they'll give you a part-time job working night shift on call, But it has to be, we're going to say, this is a social need, and we're going to mobilize to have it met. By the way, I was once part of a program like that, but it wasn't in Canada, it was in Cuba. I was part of a voluntary work brigade in Cuba in the late 1980s, where the Cuban government had realized that they were falling way behind in providing daycare for all the women that wanted to go out to work and couldn't. And their housing program was just terrible. I mean, there were multiple generations living in one apartment because there was just no housing. And so what they did was they organized, this is something, but this shows you the kind of big social mobilization you need to meet just something basic like housing, which so many people talk to us about. What they did was, and this is the revolutionary government of Cuba, because they did make a socialist revolution in Cuba in 1959, right? So it's a government of a completely different class. It really is workers and farmers that have power in their hands. Okay, so what they did was they organized what they called workers' parliaments all over the country in workplaces. We visited, it was an ice cream factory we visited. And they explained that they had a meeting, and they discussed how they could work more efficiently, the workers, and how many people they could free up so that they could be part of full-time voluntary work brigades who would build the daycare centers and the houses that they wanted to build in Havana. This was in Havana. And the people who were freed up, they would be paid by the government, but and they would work as, you know, whatever hours they could, and often it was way more than the 8 hours that they would have worked in the factory in order to build all of these socially needed structures. And then in the factories, often workers were really pleased because, you know, they had been saying for years to their manager, you know, change this production line, take the curve out, all the bottles fall off. You're not listening to us. This is why we have breakages. But these workers' parliaments really helped workers become more efficient in the factory. And I was the work brigade that I was on. It was an international work brigade, you know, to go and learn about the Cuban Revolution. We were part of helping to build a hospital or renovate a hospital in East End Havana. And it was really, we met high school students who were in that, on that work site. We met workers from office workers, all kinds of people that had been freed up to go and help meet these needs. And everybody who wanted to, a place was found for them. But you see, that kind of thing, when it's a government that comes out of a people's revolution, a socialist revolution, you can do that. But that's what the unions need to be fighting for, because that's how we'll solve the housing crisis here, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you also brought up like unemployment is too. I myself like confess like I have been unemployed like since January of this year. And so it seems like there is no jobs for anyone. Like it keeps going up, but we don't see any solution from government level. But do you, so as you also brought up like housing crisis, you know, so do you think the mass immigration is playing a role for this housing crisis and inflation?
That is a real divide and rule tactic that the governments use. Here in Quebec, Premier Legault has blamed immigrants for the housing crisis, says that they're not learning French fast enough. We reject all of that. The Communist League campaign, absolutely 100% wrong. We say everybody who is physically in Canada, living in Canada, should never be subject to deportation, and everybody should get status here in Canada, because the immigrants are not responsible for the speculation of the real estate industry and the shortage of housing. It is big business, and the way priorities are decided according to private profit. Immigrants did not create capitalism. They are victims, just like all other workers, of the boss's profit drive. And in fact, in the hotel workers' strike, it's particularly noticeable how many workers who are part of the hotel unions here come from all over the world. And union meetings are in English, French, Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, Ukrainian, and probably other languages, but those are the 5 that I heard about. So immigrants are part of the working class and part of the fight for the way forward. And it's a life and death question for the union movement to understand that. So the unions, in fact, have put out some very good, I think, calls that we should be supporting. First of all, against these closed work permits, where you're allowed to come into the country and then you can only work for one employer. That's very dangerous, because it means that employer can really exploit you. And the other thing here in Quebec, which I think is very important, is that the FTQ, which is the union federation that I'm a member of, they call for French language classes to be provided at work, because that's where you can learn French. And people who come to this country want to be able to communicate. You can get a job more easily if you speak the language, but it's very difficult to learn when you're working and you've got everything else going on in your life. And the other thing is there aren't enough French language classes being offered. There are long waiting lists to get into these classes. So if it was seen as a tool of work and it was part of what you learned at work. So again, you have to focus on the government and the employers and demand our rights. Never accept the divide and rule.
Okay. Yeah, but it seems like is government or some other like media is also showing it that it means that so it is also a basic myth like when the demand goes up, then the price will go up. Right now, like what with respect to housing, like there are more people are demanding for housing, and it means the Canada population rapidly is growing up. Like it just went up to like 41 million, I believe, but it is over like 40 million. But do you still don't think this mass immigration like from the international students and temporary workers or other asylum seekers are playing any role for this housing crisis?
The housing crisis and the problem with high rents existed way before international students came to Canada in big numbers. And they're now being made scapegoats for a problem that has been developing for a long time. So I think that it's completely, it will prevent workers from pushing for the solutions we need if we blame international students or temporary workers for these problems. You see, all workers need a place to live. And we have, as you say, big unemployment right now. We know that, the official figures are underestimated. So that's why I said that for the union movement to, in fact, demand to organize a fight to say, look, we have people who have needs, housing, daycare, hospitals, and we have people who want to work. Put the two together. That's what the solution that we should be looking to. Put us to work, to build the things we need, and then to be able to work in them. We have the people, we have the resources. We can do it. But the will by the government is not there because it's a capitalist government. So we have to, we have to begin to mobilize a movement that is based on a completely different foundation. And the fact that it's possible is shown by, the history of the union movement, which has fought against tremendous odds, that the railway unions themselves, in the early 1950s, they went on a strike that won the 40-hour week, and the employers always say you can't reduce the work week, but they reduced it from 48 to 40, but because they fought. It's possible, but we have to, because that's their biggest weapon, to make us think that we don't have any strength and that we can't fight. But when we have confidence and knowledge of our own capacities, we can fight and win everything, including making a socialist revolution like they did in Cuba.
Yeah, and so what's your take on foreign interference? Like there was a report like NCCOP like in 2019 and 2021. Some foreign government interfered in Canadian affairs, such as like China, which was mostly named, and then Russia, Pakistan, Iran, India, and these countries' names were included on NCCOP report, and there are 11 MPs whose names are those MPs' names are in that report, but they are redacted, but whoever read that report they know, like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau himself and Jagmeet Singh or Elizabeth May or Blanchet, like these folks know which MPs are those, but Blanchet confirmed if there is none, like from Bloc Québécois, if there is any, he would be kicked out, he or she. And Jagmeet Singh also confirmed it. It means if there is any NDP caucus member, so who would be kicked out. How do you see, like, are you, do you feel comfortable working with an MP who is colluding with foreign powers?
I think that all governments have projects around the world to influence, to build networks and all that. And honestly, I think the biggest danger from this campaign is that the government gives itself more rights to stir up racist prejudices and give itself more police rights. Because I tell you what happened with this campaign about Chinese influence here in Quebec. There are 2 Chinese community centers in the Montreal region, and the RCMP had no hard evidence about any misdoings by either of these 2 community centers. But what they did was they went public with the fact that they were investigating them. And so they smeared the organizers of these 2 community centers and made a cloud of suspicion hang over them. They lost some of their funding. They had all kinds of problems because of this announcement, and none of them were ever charged with anything in these Chinese community centers. So are we going to accept that the government, under the guise of foreign interference, start using its police force to accuse without any proof and start building suspicion? If you have something that is illegal, charge people, and otherwise shut up, because those who are usually at the real objects of this kind of thing are working people who build solidarity with others around the world, and who have links with labor organizations in other countries. So my only concern is what the government is doing, not what other governments are doing.
So you think these MPs, which believe to be 11 of them, so do you think it is untrue?
I have no idea. If they have something they've done that's illegal, charge them. Otherwise, shut up.
Yeah, you think if they have done anything, their name should be publicly announced, but we don't see it is going to happen because they have some protection, parliamentary, I think, privilege. Their name should not be released. So otherwise you could face some concern, even though our CMP commissioner said if those names come public, so it could be a chaos, like when he was giving an interview to CBC. So this is another concerning. Okay, so let's
just say, I just see this kind of smear campaign without any proof is dangerous, because what it does is it promotes racist prejudices, and it promotes the idea that we're all Canadians together who should protect our country. And it's not true. We are not all Canadians together. The Canadian government and the Canadian capitalists, those that run the rail companies, the hotels, all the other big businesses, they have interests totally different from yours and mine. And so I am not in this together with them to protect Canada's interests. I protect working people's interests. So I reject that whole campaign. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Okay. So there is also a campaign is going on, longest ballot, So they are running candidates like what we saw at Toronto St. Paul's by-election, and they are doing a campaign in also in Montreal, you know. So it means they are asking for electoral reform, what Justin Trudeau, when he was running for prime minister, like back in 2015, so he promised that it will be the last post-ballot election, you know, but it seems like then he did not fulfill his own promise. So they are protesting and they are running candidate. They may run over 100 candidate, and in the last Toronto St. Paul's election they ran at least 73 candidates. The ballot was 84, but those were from other parties or independent, you know. But so this also campaign, these candidate would, like, as you are a serious independent candidate, it could make some concern for you, like, because it could like split your vote. So how do you see this campaign?
I think that it is not a good campaign for workers. I think that it really distracts and miseducates, because elections are serious things where we discuss the real crisis that we're facing and what to do about it. And this initiative completely misses the point that reform of how exactly you vote is not going to deal with the big problems that we face, because it's what we need is to have a party of labor. We need a party that organizes working people to fight for our rights. And that's what we need to be discussing. How can we organize, not to think that putting an X on a piece of paper once every 4 years is going to solve our problems. We need to use this election campaign to have a serious discussion. And this is taking away from that. It's just making it into a joke. And we don't need jokes. We need serious discussion. And so, and being able to build solidarity with the rail workers' strike, to discuss why this shows the potential for having a political party of working people, that, you know, that's what we're trying to do. That's what the Communist League aims to do 365 days a year, whether there's an election on or not. So I think this initiative is very bad.
And also La Presse called those longest ballot candidate bogus. And you are also saying like it seems like this is a joke, you know, like it is not okay. And so they need some media attention. So, you know, like they are now getting some media attention. And how do you see like media is playing a role on these things?
Well, the media is big business, and so they will reflect the interests of big business. So they will give more airtime and press time to the parties, the big parties of the Canadian rulers, you know, and the parties that support big business, you know, Greens, the NDP, the Liberals, the Conservatives, all of those. And that's why, in fact, we have our own newspaper, which it's themilitant.com. It's also, it exists in paper version. I'm very bad at using the camera, but you see that's there. Yeah. That's it. But it's themilitant.com. You can also look it up online, because it's really important for workers to have our own press. The unions have their own papers, and we put out a paper. It's a weekly socialist paper. And really that's what we need, because we want press time. I'm very grateful to you for talking to me today. Everything helps to get out the word. But of course, the big business media will reflect their own interests.
Yeah. And do you think the media should be funded by government? Like we saw, like there was a big bailout for media subsidies. I think it was around like 600 million. And we recently heard like CVC executives receive like around $18 million for bonuses. But despite big layoff, like it seems like they are kicking out some great journalists, but the top executives are keep receiving bonuses. So do you think it is okay?
The governments have a long history of giving huge handouts to big business. Here in Quebec, they've just given over $1 billion to the electric battery, development. No, I mean, it's just breathtaking what they give to, to private industry. The thing is, you see, that we're not going to have independent media unless it comes from well, you can never be independent. You're either going to reflect the interests of one social class or another. There's no such thing as neutrality, Yeah. So, I mean, that's why on our newspaper, the banner says a socialist news weekly published in the interests of working people. We say up front, that's our bias. We're based in the working class. So really, I mean, that's the point, is you're never going to have anything neutral. And the government, of course, it's the government's what the government does to give handouts to all big business is not, it's not acceptable. But that's where the only way to fight for the social programs we need is, the mobilizations that I've just laid out. There's no, you're not going to vote it in by a discussion. It's got to be a real fight amongst social forces where the working class organizes to bring our weight to bear.
And could you please confirm that did you sit with any media before giving an interview to me, like a mainstream or other independent media?
No, I haven't yet, although I've been contacted by the Student Association of the Cégep, the junior college in the riding. So I expect to be talking with them. And I have sent out press releases and so on. So we'll see if I get any other requests.
And do you like, as I said, like it seems like mainstream media always gave a priority to major parties. Like this is completely ridiculous. Yeah, and thank you so much, Katie, for joining me. And for the last, what's your message to Montreal residents who will go on polls on September 16th?
I call on people to, first of all, before the vote, go to the picket lines of the rail workers and be part of that fight. That's the most important thing you can do right now. And on September 16th, yes, vote for Katy LaRouche Communist League, but do that on that one day and then continue the fight to be part of labor battles, strengthen your unions, join picket lines and other social mobilizations, speak out against Jew hatred. There are bound to be opportunities to be part of the fight to defend ourselves against attacks on synagogues, schools, and also, do check out our newspaper, themilitant.com. And also, we have public meetings every Saturday evening at our hall, which is 7107 Saint Denis. And so please contact us. May I give my phone number so anybody can call me?
If you would like to.
Yeah, 514-554-0481. You will find our office address and so on in the Militant, but it's quicker if you use a cell phone, so I'm just giving you mine. But we want people to be active. The Communist League calls for people to act in our own name. And so vote for us, but also join us in action.
Okay, thank you, Miss Katie. It was a great discussion with you, with lots of information you shared, and I hope and wishing you very best for a by-election, and I hope you would make an impact.
Thank you very much
It's my
for
pleasure.
your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.